Hey, welcome back to the Soul Pod. This is Stacy. Einstein said adversity introduces a man to himself. This counts for you ladies as well, of course. Adversity does. That's where we really learn who we are, when we run into things that we have to go through. And when we decide that we're going to go through them, not around them and not pause, but actually go through them, allow ourselves to be there. Discomfort is where all personal and spiritual growth happens. There's no other place that happens. And I've said this again and again, and we'll talk about it probably more on other videos because it's a topic that has a lot of layers, and that also, with a lot of encouragement, is a really helpful place to dive into personal work. Spiritual growth and personal growth explode when we lean into our discomforts, and especially when we start getting through them and we start looking for new discomforts to lean into instead of just the stuff that happens to us, but finding things that are uncomfortable and going straight towards them. I'm not talking about some scary thing like someone with an axe handle walking up the street late at night. No, don't do that. Not stuff that will physically harm you, just stuff that emotionally is a challenge for you. It's okay to lean into those things. It's important to lean into those things. So much growth happens in those places. I myself now will go out of my way to look for things that are outside of my comfort zone and lean into them. And this didn't happen just because I'm a glutton for punishment or, I like pain or discomfort. It came from an experience of going to a weekend workshop about 10 years ago when I was going through my spiritual awakening. There was this moment that happened. And I've talked about this before. So if you've heard this story, it might be a repeat, but I'll do just a quick synopsis here. A friend recommended this workshop that sounded abysmal to me. There were, it's very touchy feely, and oh my gosh, you got to stare into people's eyes and connect on a human level. And I was not in the headspace to be doing that at that point. It was just too much loss in my life at that moment to want to connect with anyone. I was inside of myself, feeling sorry for myself, licking my wounds, not wanting to get out of bed, deeply in depression. And this friend had the wisdom to know that it would be beneficial for me. So I took him up on it and I went to this thing. And it was one of the most uncomfortable things, maybe up until that point, other than dealing with death. In terms of spiritual work, it was one of the most, probably the most uncomfortable thing I dealt with was going through this weekend. And it was also the most amazing experience I had up until that point in terms of personal and spiritual growth, and particularly spiritual growth. Incredibly powerful. And my takeaway from that was that things that are uncomfortable aren't necessarily bad. Neil Donald Walsh said, life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Life begins at the end of your comfort zone. What does that mean? It means that we don't fully blossom until we lean into those areas of discomfort. It's a huge area for growth. So after that experience, I realized that which isn't going to harm me physically is a good thing. And so I spent several years, probably 4, 5, 6, and I still do. It's just not with such intensity, but at least 4 or 5 years looking for things that made me uncomfortable to test them. I would listen to podcasts that I didn't like the title of, that triggered me in some way. I'm like, oh, politically this is so different than me, and I'd listen to it and I'd be like, yeah. Every now and then there was something that woke me up and introduced something to me that was useful, a different perspective, a different take on something that I had a set judgment about. I would read books that people recommended to me, little synchronicities of, oh, you should read this book. And I'm like, oh, so funny, someone else said that, or I saw that on a video, or I'd never heard of that, and suddenly it's popping up. And I just started taking those things and running with them. And even though they were books I would normally not waste my money on, it turned out they weren't a waste of money at all. They were hugely beneficial, and they were just the right books at just the right time. I recommend books frequently because they were so powerful for me, and a lot of other people will also do this on videos. Here's a great book you should read. It may or may not be great for you, but if it's the second time you heard it pop up in a short period of time, or the third time, get on it. That's a synchronicity. It's in your face. Unless it's some massive bestseller that, is on the front page everywhere and you can't avoid it. But if it's something you'd never heard of and suddenly it's the second or third time you've heard of it, wow, the universe is talking. Lean into that. But back to the topic, I would go out of my way to find discomfort. And I want to recommend for you a personal growth tool of looking for your discomforts. Lean into them. Find stuff that you have a judgment about and go towards it. Read a book that you wouldn't normally read. Watch a video. listen to a podcast, whatever it is. Have an experience. Someone says, "Oh, you should go to this festival or something," and you're like, "Ah, that's not for me." Maybe it is. You don't know. It's like the first time I tried sushi. Someone's like, "Hey, you should try sushi." I was 32, I think. My 32nd birthday. My friend's like, "I'm gonna take you to sushi." I'm like, "I don't think I like sushi." And he goes, well, "How many times have you tried it?" Well, I haven't. I just had a judgment about it, right? You know what one of my favorite foods is now? So you got to stay open to these things because you never know what's in the cornucopia until you go into the cornucopia and you dig around a bit. You look at it from the outside and you're like, "Yeah, it's not for me. Look at all that. It's not for me." Judgment gets in the way of personal growth. Cut that shit out. Get rid of your judgment. Toss that shit in the garbage. Dive in. Look for your discomforts. Go straight towards them. You know what? You're not always going to get some great benefit from it. Sometimes you will, sometimes you won't, but you never know what you're going to get from it until you dive into it. You got to get out of your comfort zone to find the gold. You got to dig a little to get to the shiny stuff. Sometimes it's just rubble and it's not useful. Sometimes you find that nugget, priceless, priceless. So, what discomforts can you lean into today? What do you have? Do you have any synchronicities that are cracking that are saying, "Hey, check this out, check that out"? Do you have a discomfort that comes to mind right now that maybe in your mind you're going, "Not that one"? Lean into that one. That's the one. The more uncomfortable, the better. As long as it won't physically harm you, but might emotionally trigger you or make you uncomfortable, that's the magic, my friend. Get in there. Lean towards your discomforts and find massive amounts of personal growth. I'll see you on the next video.